Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on what is new in new defense. The webinar is organized by Eurodefense Finland in cooperation with the digital defense ecosystem. My name is Hanna Ojanen. I work as research director at Tampere University and I am the president of Eurodefense Finland. For those not familiar with Eurodefense Finland yet, it is an association that is part of a wider network of Eurodefense associations in Europe. The first one established in the Nordic countries for some 5 years ago, and one that aims at increasing awareness and discussion on issues of European security and defense. And that is what we are going to speak today about. To today's program, we will be speaking about something new in this very field, new defense, what it means. We have two excellent speakers here in the studio, Sauli Eloranta and Jarmo Puputti, whom I will introduce in more detail soon. And our program is as follows. The two speakers will both have some 10 minutes for their presentations, followed by a 5-minute comment from Robin Ashby online that will be introduced later on too. Then we'll have a short panel discussion between the three of us in the studio. And after that, in about an hour, you'll get the floor. I will be taking questions in order of appearance, and you can ask for the floor either by the raise your hand function in Zoom or writing questions in the chat. A couple of words on the technical side before we start. The webinar is on record and the first part will be recorded too, while the questions and answers will not be. An edited recording of the first part will be available later on. And one more piece of advice for you. Please check that you have your name visible on Zoom so that we can see who is there and we can call you. You can use the 3 buttons on your Zoom screen to change if you need to. And of course, we'll appreciate seeing you on the screen at least when you pose questions. But that was the technical side. Now it's time to start. It is time to give the floor to our first speaker. Sauli Eloranta is Vice President for Defense at the VTT, which is a Finnish state-owned research institution among the leaders in Europe in its field, with the aim of advancing the utilization of research and technology in commerce and society. Sauli is also Chairperson of the Management Board of the Digital Defense Ecosystem. Over to you, Sauli. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Hanna, and hello everybody online. So privileged to talk today about the new defense and a phenomena that I hope that is raising curiosity, how we see that and what is really this new defense. And I think after today's webinar, you have an understanding about what this all seemingly, let's say, disparate and disconnected type of events, what is happening around the traditional defense industry actually is. And is there a common denominator for this phenomena, what there is? And first of all, about the need for renewing the industry. I mean, as we well know in early history, the defense industry has been, let's say, not really growing fast due to geopolitical situation. And during the past years, there's a very fast-growing defense market due to war in Ukraine and what have you. Another phenomena that we have seen, especially in Ukraine, is the technology intensiveness. It's not always so that all the used systems would be high tech. It's maybe rather the contrary, that there has been a lack of smart systems. So if you have a lack of smart systems, that is easily driving your let's say battlefield into material battle, which is let's say resource wasting and all of that. Then one other feature is also the need for faster innovation. So in earlier years, the innovation cycles might have been many years or even decades of time needed to renew those systems. And today, the countermeasures need to be developed during the crisis in a matter of weeks or months rather than years. And then finally, the potential of dual-use technology has been now very visible, for example, in Ukraine, when the demolished mobile communication systems have been able to be replaced by, for example, satellite communication, and there are many examples of that. And I'll try to describe that a bit later here. And then, if we think of this as a paradigm shift of new defense, you could think that there are similar phenomena also. You might remember the new space or new space economy that was there maybe less than 10 years ago, when a new market entrants came into a very dominantly government-driven business of space programs. And then you started to have SpaceX's or even in Finland, ICE and what have you. And now what we are seeing is that it's not the same phenomena, but similar, I would say, that there are current well-established defense companies and the emergence of new defense players. So if you think of a typical player on the left-hand side here, established, they would be typically large defense primes that would have a certain strong position or partnership or long-term agreement with the Defense Administration to deliver services. And they have had their own, let's say, intimate or exclusive supply chains, which have been consisting of mainly pure defense players. Whereas in new defense, there are a growing number of companies that are showing interest for market entry. So there could be so-called dual-use technology players or purely civilian technology players that are entering the market. The new defense players cannot access the market in the same way as established defense companies that have the customerships and they understand the regulatory framework, the security issues, and what have you. So therefore, my kind of view would be that this would be more of a coexistence rather than a disruption, so that new defense companies would be coming and destroying what is established. So I think it's rather the contrary, that there is a complementation. About, for example, funding in the established defense, they have been very deeply connected mainly to national MODs or Ministries of Defense or Department of Defense, and it has been fully funded by defense budgets. Whereas in new defense, there are new types of funding mechanisms which are less directly connected to actual defense budgets. So, for example, in the European Defense Fund, you have huge budgets for developing technology in Europe, which is like 1 billion euros per year. You have new mechanisms like the Defense Innovation Unit of the US DoD or the NATO Diana things, or even European investment banks that are easing up their funding schemes. One issue related to funding is also that it's now ethically seeming to be appropriate to fund dual-use technology or even defense technology. I talked about the development cycles. On the left-hand side, we are easily talking about more than 10 years development cycle from idea to deployment, whereas in new defense, the thing can be in a couple of months. About cost, if you think of established defense, so typical product or outcome of a system is a very expensive system that is very capable, and therefore the administrations can only afford to get very few of those systems. Whereas in new defense, the price level of a singular system is very inexpensive, so that you can get them in higher numbers, but they would be less capable as a system. So it would be some sort of a, let's say, mix what you have there. But basically, you can see that there are fundamental differences between, on the left-hand side, what's the established and what's the new. And then personally, I always need to check, what can I find from AI? And I just inserted this prompt to ChatGPT and ask his or her opinion about the matter. And I asked, tell how recent tech development in defense applications differs from the past, especially in how civilian solutions are utilized. And you can read from here that it's actually stating pretty much the same thing what I was saying. So this just means that if you take a look at this phenomena from public sources, then all the elements of this phenomena are well present in let's say, publicly available information. That's the only message from this slide, what you can see here. I think that these issues, what are coming out from, let's say, public sources, are very precise about, let's say, how these things are going, from civilian-led innovations, and shift from military first to dual use, integration of commercial, off-the-shelf COTS products and all of that, cybersecurity, satellite technologies, and then also some, let's say, less material things like open innovation and collaboration. That seems to be also the case. So unlike, let's say, very hidden or secret things, and then the speed of adoption, which is like non-material types of things. So so no secrets here. Here are some examples about new technology solutions when they are entering the market. And I have compared civilian and defense applications. So, in civilian, you can see one of those Tesla electric cars. And that can be actually a disruption, because when there is a disruptive phenomena in automotive industry, like the transition from normal combustion engines to electric cars, then there's always an opening for new entrants. And that's where Tesla hit, and it turned these clunky and poor performance early electrical vehicles into some sort of status symbols or something which high performance. And there is one example of new space as well. You can see the thing which looks a bit like binoculars. So it's Kuva space, hyperspectral imaging nanosatellite, which is now able to be launched into space with some very cash, let's say, cash effective private players. In defense, you can see quite a lot of those examples are actually stemming from civilian tech development. So drones, autonomous vehicles, communication systems, things like that. So they are rather coexisting. They are complementing the present battlefield. So rather than actually disrupting, but they are helpful. About the new defense, this is a snapshot from Finland, so it seems to raise a lot of interest. The NATO Diana establishment in Finland was earlier in spring, very highly done. And then you can see some of the logos here at the underneath of the slide, which means that a typical way of collaboration is that you are liaising with strategic partners to do this thing. So those are players from Finland, government players, and private investment players, and things like that are now able to get a lot of support mechanisms going for companies that want to enter the defense market or dual use market. So this is something that, from a brand point of view, seems to be very attractive. And then more and more companies on the civilian side will get to know about this opportunity, and they learn about how to get their products delivered to defense market. And then Jarmo will also present about this digital defense ecosystem. I myself, the chairman of the management board, and Jarmo is running the coordinating company XD Solutions. And here you can see that there are quite a lot of companies that we are knitting together in the name of new defense, and trying to really extract a lot of innovativeness, especially from those dual-use companies, and then connect those to defense companies, and then, of course, also connecting research into this game. So this is a unique model, at least in Europe, I suppose in the world as well, very trust-based collaboration system as we see at the moment, and an effective one. And that's about my part. So then I'll hand over to Jarmo. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, thank you very much indeed, Sauli. That was a very good illustration of the differences between the old and the new. And indeed, we could go directly to Jarmo Puputti, our second speaker. Jarmo is the leader, as we just heard, of the digital defense ecosystem, a network of Finnish companies in defense and technology. And Jarmo is also a member of the board of Eurodefense Finland. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Hanna. Thank you for having me. It's a really pleasure to build on what Sauli already discussed earlier in his presentation. Sauli presented his established defense versus new defense, and he stated that we are complementary. This is kind of a list of those topics what Sauli already discussed and mentioned. I'm not going to repeat what Sauli said, but I want to take a couple of items out of this list which are of interest. So, building on what Sauli already mentioned, we are seeing that there are a growing number of dual-use and startup companies who are contributing in our comprehensive defense. And that has created strongly in Ukraine. When Russia started this aggressive war 2.5 years ago, then Ukrainians need to react very quickly. And it came from the whole society. They started to use everything what they had in hands. And that involved a lot of private companies, startup companies, and even kind of the individual who decided that they need to do something, and they created new companies. Another thing what happened at the same time in Ukraine, there was private investors who gave money for those people and they donated money, and that money was used for purchasing commercial equipment, and they were put together and they changed the purpose on what those commercial things were used. Same time as Sauli mentioned, there are new innovation schemes and new organizations who are putting money into making this development faster and utilizing all the deep technologies and new technologies which are already used in, let's say, communication technology or AI or quantum technology, which is coming, is very interesting for purposes of defense as well. But more importantly, this collaboration with not the traditional defense players is most important and interesting. If we look what happened in Ukraine, we had visitors from Ukraine, and one of the persons was an investor from Ukrainian venture capital fund. And he explained that also in Ukraine, Ministry of Defense was actually very rigid and slow moving. They were not able to adapt into new situation quickly. It was Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine who was able to kind of redirect the effort what they had already started in civil society. So they had the mechanisms to mobilize those innovative teams, and they had the mechanisms to field new innovations to battlefield. And MOD was able to adapt and utilize it, but not really drive this development. What we have now seen that we really have to take together all the relevant players. We need to have defense forces, we need to have defense administration, but we need to have also other ministries, other authorities. We need to have traditional defense industry, and we need to have all these new innovative players, and they have to find new ways to work together and add on to capabilities and strengths of each other. Another really important topic to realize is that there was kind of a tension and crisis ongoing in Ukraine for many years. And maybe Russians were underestimated the will to defend of Ukrainian people. In Finland, we have made surveys of willingness to defend our own country. And in Finland, we have 82% of people saying that they want to defend and do their best to defend the country, even if they consider that the end result would be uncertain. And what is actually very important to understand that these people who have this will to defend, they are working in companies, they are working in organizations, they have this will to defend in their everyday work. And because of that, we should understand that actually companies, they have will to defend. There's very deeply rooted values in people who are forming the organizations, who are actually the core of the companies. And that means that decision makers and also people in organizations, they create collective will to defend in company and organization level as well. And this is one of the strengths we have not yet utilized as widely as we should. Sauli already discussed quite much about this technology and dual-use technology's impact on warfare, how Ukrainians were able to, for example, use Starlink or drones and further develop those. It comes from the fact that these companies are actually doing these technologies and research institutes are doing this technology development for other purposes. And when the need is coming, they can very quickly adapt to new challenges. And this is actually the route for the possibility. We have to be able to mobilize our innovations. We have to be able to mobilize our companies, organizations, research institutes, and actually those ecosystems which are connecting these players together. So my kind of takeaway from our 2 years road in digital defense ecosystems and also our understanding what is happening at the moment is that the traditional thinking about this triple helix type of concept that defense industry research and governments, they should come together and they should start to develop jointly things. We have to expand this thinking further. We have to understand that research, defense industry, and all of these technological companies and organizations and startups, they are creating innovation ecosystem, and that's one whole in this equation. Another one is that it's not only individual governments who are interested about the capabilities and development. It's, for example, when war in Ukraine started, it took only a couple of weeks when public opinion in Finland changed totally about joining NATO. And then we started in a couple of months the application and accession process to be members. And now we are happily a part of this great alliance. So it's not about the government, but it's really the alliance and governments and nations, they are forming the framework. And third element is finance ecosystem, like Sauli already pointed out. And we have seen strongly that there are public investors, there are private investor fund companies, and so venture capital funds who are able and willing to come to support the development. And when we combine this new triple helix together, then we have possibility to react faster. So to end my conclusions, I'm on the same opinion like Sauli said. The new defense now exists alongside established defense. It's complementary. It's making new ways, new let's say processes and new opportunities as well. Secondly, there's need for new forms of cooperation, and that means that governmental organizations, ministries, and defense forces, they have to learn how to deal together with this new defense concept. And that means that we need to have a more agile procurement systems. We have to be able to have access to testing grounds, and we have to be able to give feedback for companies and like startup teams, so that they understand what is working, why it's not working, how to improve it, and really establish this very quick iteration loops to make things better and answer to these challenges what we see when we are going into crisis. And last but not least, the financial sector significance is growing. We are not able to finance everything from budget on planned processes. We have to accept the idea that also private investors, they can understand what is good ideas and how they are developing. So these are the three topics which I would like to put as an end conclusion of this understanding of new defense phenomenon. Thank you.
Excellent, Jarmo. Thank you very much indeed. Also for bringing in Finland, the particularities of the Finnish situation, and then the potential for innovation. That is very important. At this point, I would like to hear from our commentator online. We are really very happy to have with us Robin Ashby from the United Kingdom. He's Director General UK Defence Forum and Secretary General of Eurodefense UK. Robin, over to you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. New defence implies new ways of doing things. This applies in particular to innovation. Large companies are good for taking programme responsibilities, for providing financial stability, and for bringing mass to bear. Small companies can, in the words of Jonathan Taplin's book, move fast and break things. That is, approaching work and innovation with an emphasis on speed and experimentation. It's better to make mistakes and disrupt technologies along the way than to play it safe at a slow and steady pace. Modern warfare shows what can be done. 3 years ago, who would have envisaged a Ukrainian shopgirl standing in a car park with an iPad directing a drone to attack a tank which looks like it's carrying a garden shed on its back for protection? What American commander could have imagined that his hugely expensive mobile forces would have been vulnerable to landmines made out of wood by Afghan insurgents? When the Americans landed on D-Day, they suddenly realised they were vulnerable to ambushes launched from behind the Normandy bocage, that's dense hedges looming above narrow lanes. But within 48 hours, an engineering sergeant had invented the Rhino tank. By welding sturdy teeth to the front, it was able to rip holes in the hedges to allow infantry fast, safe passages into the lanes. There were 23 marks of British Spitfire in service from 1940 to 45, flying better, faster, higher, with larger cannon and then rockets. Trials were brief. The new types were flown to frontline airfields by civilian women, typed instructions on the new features. Our wonderful, brave ATA or ATA girls. There were no arrangements for them to return to base. They relied on their charms to get a motorcycle to give them a lift to the nearest station. As I suggested, such initiatives rarely come from committees, bureaucracies, and large companies. They come from risk takers, entrepreneurs, inspired engineers, usually to be found in small and medium enterprises, inspired and run by owner managers. Often such SMEs, to use the catch-all abbreviation, are already part of the supply chain, and sometimes they've very little idea of what they're being asked to make, what they're being asked to make is used. But if asked, they would probably suggest a better, faster, cheaper way of making components, or alternative ways of providing the same functionality. This requires the creation and sustainment of a circle of trust and two-way communications. During the Falklands War, the fear was that one of our carriers would be sunk. HMS Illustrious was being built at Swan Hunter shipyards. The construction director and the designated captain were given the order, get her out, whatever it takes. Freed from bureaucracy within an enthusiastic team, she was delivered by the builders 3 months ahead of schedule, commissioned en route to Portsmouth to take on war stores, and then sailed south with contractors still on board. The final bill to the Ministry of Defence was below the contracted amount. There have been attempts made to harness SMEs and their creativity through defence regional trade bodies. In the case of the North of England, I was instrumental in the expansion and acceptance of Northern Defence Industries to a body several thousand strong, which has now been subsumed into the Engineering Employers Federation. Through regional politicians, we bypassed existing supply chains and created downwards pressure on the Ministry of Defence to listen to them, helped by inviting defence ministers to conferences and officials to mini trade exhibitions. Joint stands were organised at the major exhibitions too, Farnborough Air Show and the Defence and Security Equipment International Show. The prime contractors started off getting involved because it was seen as the politically correct thing to do. But then the value of such a group of businesses in their supply chains started to be realised. In time, a prime contractor started a partnership with Durham University, which involved in British management experts training their people in the USA. Others set up small subsidiaries in the region, yet others supported SMEs in their presentations to banks for loans to enable them to buy new equipment to make components. Another set up their own research cell. Other regions of the UK followed suit. But we have still not reached the level of sophistication of the French DGA procurement system, which actively encourages SMEs to submit ideas online in French or in English. The future can learn from the past, the new from the old, the big from the little, so long as they're prepared to accept they have no monopoly on wisdom and are prepared to listen and action, not just think they know all the answers. Thank you.
Those were great examples. And indeed, as you said, initiatives rarely come from bureaucracies. And now I would like to hear from Sauli and Jarmo, anything you would like to say in reply?
Okay, thank you so much, Robin, for your great talk. So I know your background, well-established person, in the UK area of defence and all of that, and your talk is having some soft elements about probably cultural issues and the receptiveness, to really absorb or accept new solutions to defence solutions. So that might be the key. Then also what I took from your talk is that in the time of crisis, there is always a need for being innovative. So you need to come up with solutions. Nothing goes according to plans. And I suppose the army that is messing less is the winner, but it also messes an awful lot. So it is the foggy nature of war that you have to act with the information what you have and then create these new solutions. And thank you so much for sharing those. I think what is important is that there is always the capability to create these new solutions or countermeasures. And of course, earlier in history, it has been a bit more of physical nature, more tangible or less virtual. And now when we are entering the more technical solutions and technically advanced battlefield, then we need to have people that understand, rather than the bocage, maybe now it would be the electronic warfare or the cryptography or how you are kind of making the sensors blind and so on. So you need to have new capabilities. I think that what that might need is to be having better prepared before the crisis, so that you would be testing out operational methods or processes on how you can actually harness what Jarmo was talking about, the civilian side and the civilian side innovation capability, how you can harness that into use, so that if there is a crisis, you would have a tested collaboration pattern, how you are delivering innovations to battlefield. But that's my concern, that if we are not doing it now, then we are losing precious time when that capability is needed. But thank you, Robin, so much for that.
Yeah, thank you from my side as well. I think Sauli already very well summarized everything. It was really nice to hear your comments that what happened during the Second World War, as well as Balkan War. And as Sauli said, during the time of crisis, we are to become very innovative. And it's very important that we could be practicing training this behavior already before. So not to react, but to be proactive. And this is exactly what we are thinking in digital defense ecosystem, that how we could mobilize this innovation ecosystems and financing ecosystems in advance, so that we would be prepared and would be trained and we had all these processes and methods in place. As well as, like Sauli said, the technology is so complicated nowadays that we have to have also testing grounds, we have to have testing facilities and integration capabilities, which means that we need established defense to take advantage of these new innovations. And as you pointed out, it is very important that it's used when it's needed. And we would like to see that trained and practiced in advance.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. What follows in the webinar now is a short panel discussion here in the studio among us three, after which you will have the floor, and perhaps in 20 minutes' time. I would actually like to start from this connection between war and innovation that you brought up. You both mentioned Ukraine several times. What would be, in your view, the main core lessons that the actors have learned from this conflict? And would you say there are any other important elements or developments in the past couple of years that have brought us to this situation? Or is the war the main reason for this sudden change?
Maybe one element we can emphasize is that when war starts, you start it with you have in your stocks, what you have trained your forces to use. And when this reality of war hits you and you learn that what kind of tactics and technologies the adversary is using, you need to learn, react, and deploy new ideas into the field. And that happens obviously in both sides, which starts to increase the speed and pace of technology development. And it goes beyond technology, it goes also tactics and operations and even strategy. And during the times of crisis, we have always seen that technology develops much faster. And when war is hopefully over someday, we have to be able to once again turn the development around and take those technologies into civilian use. But at the moment, I think this we have already seen in Ukraine.
I think that what took probably quite a few people by surprise was that the duration of the crisis is far longer than I think any one of us expected. So Russia was close of making some decisive things early in the attack, and then Ukraine could withstand those things, and then it has been more like a stagnated position for now close to 3 years, when we're more than 2.5 years at the moment. I think earlier on we anticipated the crisis to be so short that we would not have time to really develop countermeasures. So you would just stockpile anything what you have and use the stockpiling then, during the battle in a very intensive manner. But now, myself coming from the VTT Technical Research Center of Finland, so this technical means that my claim is that, there is time and there will be time to develop technology. So therefore, it is of utmost importance to recognize that you have to be able to create technical countermeasures. In the earlier times, they might have been more physical countermeasures, and now they will be technical. But we can and we must be able to do those during the crisis. And then also, if you think of the level of technology of the Ukrainian war, that it started from firing missiles back and forth, and they they were running out of missiles. And then you are kind of starting to complement that with traditional artillery fire and all of that. And if you think of even the naval warfare, so Ukraine doesn't have its own naval fleet, but still, they're able to keep the Russian naval fleet in its bases or further away from the battle because of let's say, reasonably high level of technology that is threatening the adversary. And that would be another thing, that the battle only went material because of the lack of high-tech systems and more smart weapons and all. So we don't know how the next crisis will be, but probably will be more technical, general nature, because you will have more drones, more missiles, more high-tech systems going on than what we have at the moment. So today, by lack of tech, it turned into material.
I see. I understand. So war and innovation, that is a very important link. There are many arguments you've been putting forward in favor of this emerging new defense, and one of them could be, very simply put, money. Now the question, very, very simply put, would be whether this new defense will be cheaper defense. I think overall in many European countries now the problem has been the constant rise of defense spending that may come at the expense of other important, even vital functions of the society, say health and well-being. So can this new defense be part of the solution of the economic problems of the states, or does it mean that even more is spent on defense? Who would like to answer?
If we would look what happened in space industry when budget spending was available, then the processes get more complex and system get more complex, and then you are investing more and more. Disruptive technology, like Sauli explained before, it's an underdog. It's coming with less capability and smaller cost. But if it's able to do the work, you can easily scale it. And then you have capability by the volume, and then this very fast cycle to develop it further actually brings the capacity and capability over the complex systems. But it takes obviously some time. In crisis time, this is definitely also cost effectiveness side of this thing. So with low cost drone, you can destroy very expensive tank. So cost effectiveness of this is better. But if we think really that does it save money, the best way to save money is to stop war at least. It's waste of money in that sense. But when the threat is existential, then you should be smart how to use your money, and you put your money what you get, and that starts to develop.
Yeah, if you think of normal, let's say, commercial business logic, you talk about scaling. And if you have, let's say, a lot of technology users or solution users in the civilian side, that means scaling. So Google's corporate Alphabet is using $40 billion per year for R&D. That's a big sum of money. Our Finland Nokia is using $4 billion and a change, so a big money as well. But if Alphabet has 4 billion users, so then that's where the scaling comes from. That they have billions of users or millions or hundreds of millions of users that are developing that system altogether. So if you would consider that you would have left drone development for military, let's say, organizations, probably you would be ending up in a let's say, drone that we have seen, which is having a jet engine and it's weighing, let's say, 100 million each or tens of millions each and so on. Whereas now it's €1,000 each drone because the civilian market has been able to develop the avionics, and the batteries and the production of that into very low cost. So that kind of thing is there. And then if we want to kind of utilize civilian tech in dual use and military things, typically now if you have a military project, it's kind of hidden in a security classified approach already from the beginning. But my view is that you should try to minimize that military application area and try to maximize the civilian part. So therefore, you are able to get more, let's say, scaling on that part, and you're able to access civilian funds and what have you. And you can have more exports. You can grow the companies more than just addressing the military market only.
Which brings me actually to my next question about control. This growth of the civilian sector in the field, how does it actually change the need for control or the mechanisms? I'm thinking of the sort of old defense kind of control when you have a certain control of public spending when it comes to your defense budget, or that you have a certain control when it comes to dual use technologies. There we have quite a lot of legislation. I think we just saw a new complementing national legislative act here in Finland entering into force on the export of dual use items. This is a typical way of approaching dual use goods that need an authorization for export outside the EU. Now, this is how we're used to thinking about dual use goods, that they need special regulation. They are products, software, technology that can be used for both civilian and military purposes that can't be exported like that. How do you see the need and new role for control? Who controls and how should that be organized?
That's a very complex question. But if we start from the very high level, we have seen that there is already control between, like, for example, there's a lot of restrictions what you can sell to Russia nowadays. Basically, everything is restricted, and also there is increasing amount of worries, at least how much we are dependent on Chinese technologies and how much we are really giving away our technology to Chinese and how much we are helping them to have better grip on what we have in Western countries. So that's the higher level. If we go down, the defense spending is still decision of politicians and governments, how they are spending the money in defense budget. But how the spending in development is happening, then we have to understand that in civilian market, technologies are developed because they have a market, there's demand and there's a business opportunity. And now when this civilian technology is potential to be used in military applications, it's seen as a new market for these technologies. And obviously there are those investors who are ready to fund it. And then we come into the last part of your question that, okay, if this is coming, the dual use, kind of really civilian technologies is actually applied, which means that the domain of dual use is getting wider. And that's once again the regulators' decision making, that should we limit all possible technology export to certain countries. And we have been doing that already in global scale.
Yeah, and just like Jarmo was saying about this kind of civilian company and business aspect, so the dual use in itself is a joint matter for Ministry or Department of Defense and Department of Trade. So the intention for departments of trade or ministries of trade is actually growth, employment, welfare, exports, exactly what dual use would be offering at the moment, because it's a defense market is a very fast-growing market. Whereas the Department of Defense interest is actually military capability. So not so much about the commercial issues. And of course, the military is keen on understanding the security of supply for that equipment. So there is an interest to maintain, for example, national defense. Then we have also seen in Europe that when we are, let's say, a different setup than United States, that if you think of these platforms for various systems used by defense, Europe has maybe 10 times higher number of platforms for use, because they have all been developed at the national level. So that might be something that we need still to think about, how we can unite our forces, and what's the position for smaller countries like Finland, which are tech heavy, but maybe resource constrained compared to other things. And then another thing about tech development again is the concept of trusted science. So I'm concerned that even technologies that we do not categorize as classified or defense technologies, like quantum technologies that Jarmo mentioned, others like that. So 8 out of 9 NATO's critical technologies are purely civilian-driven technologies. And they are actually the golden nuggets of our alliance, NATO alliance, EU alliance, that we need to increase sovereignty. And trusted science means that us, like research and technology organizations, universities, we need to also operate in a position where this is becoming also security critical. So the competence becomes security critical, like we discussed earlier in this dialogue, that it is the capability that is creating, let's say, the skills for creating countermeasures, and it will be more on the digital field. So therefore, it's very critical that we know how good we are, but we are not leaking that capability in an uncontrolled way outside of our alliance. And that's entirely a new topic that we have to take care of.
This is really very interesting. Now, it sounds as if we needed much more cooperation and coordination between different actors. I hear also among the ministries that might not have had that kind of cooperation before. How do you see that the role of defense administration changes, or how should it change?
I think one of the key elements is to understand that it's not so much about control and planning. It's more about creating opportunities and opening up so that the civilian players can start collaboration. This kind of evolutionary development, it's almost impossible to control and plan in advance. You don't know what kind of innovations they are coming. So you are not able to make the purchase order for new innovation. But you can publish the challenge and try to understand who has potential solution, and you are able to let them try. So facilitation is more important than planning.
Which is, I guess, quite a new approach for
Yeah, I think we have been also having a metaphor of let's say, a true ecosystem, like in the nature, so that if you are a farmer and you are seeding corn seeds, you know that you will get corn, during harvest. But if you only see that cornfield, what about the woods, the islands or forests or let's say peas or beans or other things, so that you become blind, so that a good ecosystem master would be actually a very active participant in the ecosystem and checking where this growth is coming from and cultivating that, and not only cultivating the one that you know. You never know where you are going to get new ideas. And I claim that, for example, when we have been hosting this NATO Diana, let's say, sparring events, that there are just an unlimited number of new companies arising with very, very interesting, very topical content, what they have come up with. And therefore, being a kind of a gardener or a forest ranger, in that ecosystem, it only needs you to be attractive in a way that those new companies are willing to contact you, or like this digital defense ecosystem, or somebody that will bring them together and channel to market. But again, back to, let's say, what the Defense Administration should be doing. They are, of course, mastering, they know the needs. And that is typically also the blind spot for new companies in defense, that they have a very vague picture about the actual need, the use case where the technology should be utilized. And I would say that the military, the defense administrations need to and must have resources to channel those needs better to these new players and give access to use cases for those. And then you mentioned about test facilities and all. So that is also something what the defense people might be doing. So it might look a bit naive from the defense point of view when you take a look at the new companies, because they are not really experts on defense application. But when you understand their tech, what they are doing, whether it's 3D printing or some exotic sensors, world's most sensitive photonic sensors or what have you, then you understand that they are doing something very unique, which is very important. But you need typically some sort of an integrator in between. So the mental distance from a startup to a defense administration might be just a bit too large leap, for anybody to take. So you might need a couple of steps in between, like primes, defense primes or integrators in between, or things like that.
Or ecosystems.
Or ecosystems, yeah, that are helping it out. So we're kind of a stepping stone on that journey, making it easier for maybe both parties to play with each other, because you need some sort of a connector in there.
And I, Sauli, liked your expression that the coordinator or ecosystem facilitator, they have to be active players. So they are the rangers who are actively trying to understand this equation from both sides.
Yeah.
Excellent. This idea of an integrator or a stepping stone actually sounds very good, like between the old and the new, bringing the parts together. I'd like to pose one more question before I give the floor to others. It stems from Jarmo's slides, actually. There was you showed that there would be a shift from government in the old defense to international defense alliances in the new defense. Now, what would you mean by international defense alliances, and would you place the European Union somewhere in the picture?
Okay, obviously the best example is NATO. And NATO has collective defense planning, and it's a multinational operations, what they do in certain operational areas. And for that reason, NATO is very instrumental in creating integration, standardization, and developing new concepts. And for that reason, NATO has this concept development and experimentation facilitation, what they do. They have interface integration experiments and training sessions, and they are training how different defense forces are working together for having a common target and doing the regional defense over the national borders. So this is exactly what I mean. So we are not able to consider only individual member country or nation within alliance. We have to be able to contribute to alliance level, and alliance is coordinating obviously somehow how this development is going. And I guess NATO is doing this quite effectively. They let things to grow, and then they are testing and finding out what are the best practices, and they learn from experimentation, and they distribute and deploy all the findings. Another is obviously EU, and we have seen that EU is doing on more planning type of a thing, and they have this, for example, European Defense Fund programs. The challenge is in those programs, they are formed over the years. Then you have to build up consortia who is competing for the opportunities, and then it takes time before the consortia gets money, and so it goes and goes. And later on down the road, there are capability acquisitions based on all this long development. EU has money, but this process is very complex. So combination of these two words would be much better.
So that also needs to be combined. Thank you very much indeed for your great answers. This concludes our panel discussion in this webinar. And we will also at this point end the recording of the webinar. At this point, I don't see any more questions. It will be now my pleasure to, before I thank our speakers, to perhaps let them summarize a bit or say what, how they would like to conclude this conversation. What would be the main thing you would like to convey at the end?
I mean, I think that if this session, made this new defense concept any more clear, to understand that there is a name for a multitude of things which do not follow the earlier pattern of well-established players in the defense field, then I think that we have succeeded. So when you are seeing in the defense field different activities, new players, new phenomena, or new type of things, you understand that this is part of new defense. And then when you know what new defense is kind of consisting of, then you can put it in proportion so that it's not a threat, it's an opportunity, and it's worth actually being a part of that new defense rather than trying to let's say avoid it. And it's not something what would kind of disrupt the old, but it needs to coexist. And so regardless of whether you're on the new or well-established defense side, you would both win. But if you're on established side and you are skipping new defense, then I think that that's not a wise decision. So the best decision is that when the established defense is recognizing the need and can harness the new defense, then both will win, and that would be the good recipe going forward. So that's from my side. Thanks.
I would like to say that we better to take very positive stance and believe that there's hope that things will turn better later on. And how we can do that, I think there are three things. We have to have courage, courage to take bold moves and take risks. We have to be agile. We have to understand that development happens in very quick cycles, and there have to be methods for that. And the last of the 3 points is collaboration, which means that we need to take wider societies and ecosystems to collaborate together. And that equals the hope. If we have this agility, collaboration, and courage.
This is an excellent conclusion and way of pulling everything together. Now it is time for me to thank you very much indeed. Thank you to our two speakers, Sauli and Jarmo, for great presentations and great answers. I would like to thank Robin Ashby for great comments, and you all online for taking part in the webinar and for your questions and comments also in the chat. And this brings us to the end of the webinar on new defense. So thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.
Thank you, Hanna, for moderation.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Robin.